I spent a lot of time last year walking on eggshells for people to try not to hurt their feelings and make sure that what I was saying applied to everyone. But if you are lazy at content but complain about it, then that's a you problem, and I'm not walking on those eggshells anymore. When you take shitty photos on your shitty phone and then post it on Instagram with your shitty style, it looks shitty and it looks cheap. What's up, guys, and welcome back to the Aggravated Chaos Podcast. I am your host, Crystal Chaos, and today I am joined by a very special co-host. His name is Jasper. So if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see my little doggo sitting next to me in his bed. We'll see how long it takes till he freaks out. So today we're talking about something that offended me when I first heard it, but the more I thought about it and the more that I paid attention, the more it seemed to ring true. And that something is that vivid hair color comes off as cheap. Let's get into it. Okay, so when I first heard this, obviously I took offense because I do vivid hair, I wear vivid hair, and I don't feel like it's cheap. I don't feel like I look cheap, and I don't feel like my clients look cheap, contrary to what some man on TikTok with a podcast might think. But I also know how many processes it takes to achieve. I know how much product is required, and I know how much time is involved. Many people have no idea what is involved to get these kinds of looks. However, the person who said this to me, and obviously no shade to her, not on this podcast, no shade to her. I absolutely adore her. This statement just really made me think, and it made me look at things differently. And the person who said this is also in the industry. So to me, that is saying something. As we rolled into 2024, I was watching all these hairdressers on like Instagram and TikTok, and they were posting their new branding photos beginning of the year as it goes. And I started noticing a trend. That trend is that everything is neutral. It's all beige and brown or black and white. And the main focus for these stylists that I was seeing, blonding or lived in color. Now, that's not to bash these stylists, and I'm going to explain that in a minute. But I want to note that their photos are beautiful, and I am not at all hating their photos, their videos, everything they were posting. I was like, oh, yes, girl, get it. I was loving what they were posting. It's just the trend that I noticed. It was that a lot of the people who were posting it, they were lived in color specialists, and a lot of the color scheme and whatever that was going on was neutral. So when it comes to inspirational photos on Pinterest, okay, whether it be overall branding, whether it be like website layout and design, logos, anything of that nature, we see a lot of this like clean girl, boho, neutral aesthetic, especially when it comes to hairdressers. There's not a lot of like bright, colorful, fun, and poppy branding inspo to pull from. And if you go ahead and search on Pinterest and you search hairstylist flat lay or hairstylist detail photos or hairstylist branding photos, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But if you search for fashion color hair or rainbow hair on Pinterest, there are plenty of photos to choose from. There are plenty of heads of hair and inspiration photos and articles on vivid hair color, as well as there are on lived in color as well. So what does that tell me? For one, it seems like a lot of fashion color artists don't pay as much attention to their branding as the stylists who do lived in color. And two, it looks as if fashion color artists spend more time working in their business instead of on their business. So I'm going to say something that will likely be an unpopular opinion as it goes here, and it might get me in trouble or make some people mad, but it's just something that I was thinking about. I'm not saying this is like a fact or, whatever. This is just something I was thinking about. And that is that fashion color specialists may be a bit more neurospicy than the people who do lived in color. Now, that's not to take away from anybody who has ADHD, AUHD, is on the spectrum, ADD, any of that stuff. That's not to take away from any lived in artist that does that. I'm going to explain my thought process on this, and this might be a biased opinion because I am the neurospicy and do the vivid hair. I say this because I noticed that the lived-in color side of the industry is better at focusing on imagery, branding, websites, business, whereas the colorful side, it's all about how creative we can be with our styling, how creative we can be with our color placements and our formulas. We focus on our client relationships a lot too. But I haven't ever really noticed that sort of push with the branding, etc., on the Vivid side. I think a lot of us expend a lot of our energy and creativity on the hair, the relationship, and the placement, and then the branding kind of suffers. The content suffers a lot as well. And maybe that's just because like the balance is off. In 2023, I started following a lot more blonding specialists. If you listened to episode 62, which was the burnout and breakdowns episode, I talked about how I fucking hate foiling. Foiling bores the shit out of me. It is very repetitious. And I wanted to fix that relationship with foiling because it's such a monotonous task. So I started following all of these like blonding specialists and lived in color artists. So I do get a variety of both on my feed. This is not facts. I'm not saying anybody's more neurospicy than the other. That was just kind of like my initial thought on it. I was like, I wonder if that's why. My other thought on that is because there are more artists on the lived in color side that do focus on branding. Maybe that's because that's just more of that over there. A lot of artists follow brands, stylists, and publications that post the type of work that they want to do. So like, obviously I do Vivid hair. I was following a lot more Vivid hair color artists up until recently. Whether, it's because you want to be inspired by them, if you want to learn from them, you want to see who's offering classes, whatever the case may be. But they also mirror what they do. And what I mean by that is they'll try to recreate poses, placements, styling, etc., which makes sense because if you do Vivid hair and you follow a Vivid artist who takes amazing photos and you love the way they pose their clients or they place their colors, yeah, you're going to follow them for inspiration. It's a lot harder and I have been doing this, so I know it, but it's a lot harder to follow a lived-in artist and try to replicate what they're doing with fashion color. It never comes out the same. I've been trying it. It is my mission. I have education that I've been working on specifically for this. So it is, I understand it is basically what I'm saying, but we do kind of mirror each other for those reasons. So if a balayage artist is posting new branding, a new website, overall better business practices, then it would make sense that the artists following them are going to mirror those things as well. The same thing happens with Vivid artists. I just think it's, like I said, less of focusing on branding and things like that and more of focusing on creating placements and color formulas and things like that. So for some reason, when I heard the phrase Vivid hair color can come off as cheap, it immediately made me think of this part in the Shane Dawson docuseries with Jeffree Star.
So the owner of Too Faced and I are not friends. He called, him and his sister called my brand clown makeup.
While we're not here to discuss either of those two, it just really got me thinking about how the line about Vivid hair and the line about his makeup kind of are the same. It made me think a lot about how people perceive the value of Vivid hair color, how much it should be worth, what they relate it to, etc. And unfortunately, oh, there goes Jasper. Okay, bye. Unfortunately, some people equate fashion hair color to clown hair. So I went on a deep dive on Instagram and I started looking at a lot of the fashion color artists that I look up to and that I follow. There is a very strong difference between some Vivid hairdressers in their photos and in their styling, and it comes off as clowny. And I don't mean clowny as an insult. I mean it over the top and just too much. But the other side of the Vivid community does give that luxury vibe. It gives soft, it gives blended, it gives high end, and it gives less is more. I really want to name some people that give this luxury feel when it comes to their branding and their imagery. But if I did that, I would have to name people that do clown hair, and that's just going to get me in trouble. So I'm trying to be good this year. Okay. So when you're scrolling, keep your eyes open. If you're scrolling and an image stops you and you find yourself thinking, I really like this image, ask yourself what it is about that image that you like, especially if it's a Vivid artist. Then go to their page and look at their feed. Go to their website, look at their branding, look at their copy, look at all of that stuff. And you're going to notice that some people put a lot of effort into their Instagram and almost zero effort into their website. Content doesn't just stop at Instagram. It actually should start on your website and carry over to Instagram or TikTok or wherever. Because whether we all want to admit it or not, social media is a funnel, and it should funnel people to your website to book with you if you want clients, or, if you want to work with brands, then all of that good stuff. So what is it about Vivid hair that comes off cheap to some people? I would love to know your take on this. If you're on Spotify, I'll put up a poll. I know that it's unnatural. Obviously, it's an unnatural color and it can give like Halloween vibes and whatever. But a lot of Vivid processes, they take a lot of time. Even just like a root touch up with a color refresh can take up to 8 hours. And that's not to take anything away from people who do lived in color, because balayage can take forever, foiling can take fucking forever, and then they've got a fucking tone and gloss and haircut and whatever. I get it. And I think like for Vivid artists, the only extra step that we might have would be like a pre-toner, and then the fact that we're using multiple colors. Not to mention that some of these micro like prism rainbows can take hours and hours. And I'm sure once you get like into the routine of doing it, you can like get it down a bit faster. Then you have the people who do fashion color on hair with extensions. So not only are they doing bleach and they're doing fashion color, but they're also adding extensions, which is crazy because the extensions in themselves are hella expensive. So what is it about blonde or brunette extensions that have a higher perceived value than fashion color with extensions? Part of me feels like fashion color started out as like DIY with the buying of Manic Panic at Sally's, and that's what made it like so punk rock, was like you did it yourself and you didn't give a fuck. And that's how I started coloring my hair, Manic Panic from Sally's, when I was in high school. Whereas like gray retouches and natural color has always been, as far as I can remember, it's always been an in-salon experience, and that's what made it luxury. And granted, that's not to say that some ladies don't color their grays with box color at home or, whatever, but that's just kind of like my point of view and like my thought process on it. So here's my hot take. When it comes to imagery, to me, the Vivid hair that looks cheap and clowny are the ones that are overly fucking styled. Okay? Too many bubble braids, too many micro braids, really tight, small curls that are brushed out and look frizzy as fuck. This kind of styling was really popular once upon a time, and I understand like the grunge vibe that it can give, which I'm fine with here and there, but not on every single head in your feed. And to be honest, I never liked it in the first place, but I understand it. Some people really like to do these types of styles, and I think they get really wrapped up in doing it and having fun with the styling, which is great. That's exactly what it should be. It should be fun. We all got into this for the passion of it for the most part. And if your client's down for it, then why the fuck not, right? However, when you take shitty photos on your shitty phone and then post it on Instagram with your shitty style, it looks shitty and it looks cheap. And I get the terminology Vivid hair looks cheap now. And that portion of scrolling and like looking at Vivid hair, it's that what I just described to you. That is what looks cheap to me. It doesn't look good, and nothing about that says high perceived value to me. Now, the perceived value, I also think, which I'm going to make a whole other episode about perceived value, but the perceived value of Vivid hair has a lot to do with the consumer and how they perceive the value. But in this episode, when I'm talking about perceived value, I'm talking about how they perceive your perceived value as a Vivid artist versus another Vivid artist, if that makes sense. One of the first people that I ever saw doing Vivid hair color and like gave it an actual luxury feel, which I am going to name drop here, was Phil Does Hair. He also was a person who was responsible for igniting my desire to like really want to learn photography. He would take these like beautiful movement shots with flash, right? Which I didn't know anything about flash photography at the time, and it was just stunning. There was something about it that gave off this like expensive vibe. And I don't know if it's because the flash was giving the hair so much more shine and it looked super healthy, and healthy hair is more luxurious. I don't know what it was, but it just was. Now, this is not to say that all Vivid artists have to go and learn photography and learn how to use flash or whatever, but some effort into improving your photography can't be a bad thing, right? Now, I know you're going to hear a lot about like photography and content too on the episode after this one, I think. And a lot of what I talk about here does have to do with content. It does have to do with like how you can, get clients in the door, raise your perceived value, all of these things, contest entries and whatever. But when it comes down to it, that's what most people see is your social content. That is the portfolio that you're putting out. Like millennials and Gen Z still search on Instagram for service providers. And that's not to say that they won't find them on TikTok too, but basically, they use social media to find service providers instead of Google. Google's the last place they go, and that's usually for reviews. So when video content started becoming more popular, you could see how attentive Phil was to detail. Everything from styling down to the degree that the model's head was tilted. When you would watch his videos and he would like comb out curls or he would place where he wanted the hair to be, you could see the care that he was putting in to what he was about to photograph. And I feel like there was something about that just gave expensive to me. Anytime you pay attention to detail, those details matter. Just period, details matter. So when I went into photography with the goal of trying to figure out how to take movement photos, once I figured that out and I started applying it to my content, I do feel like it really did elevate my photos and just the overall vibe of like my feed and my content in general. And when you take that extra time and you pay attention to the details, like I said, details matter, it does really elevate your brand overall. And when I say details, no, I don't mean over editing. I mean like the way the hair is laying, making sure that you're spraying down those flyaways the best that you can so you don't have to go in and spend hours editing. Just details, the background, the lighting, those are details. But just taking your client outside and saying, okay, I'm going to take your photo on my phone. I'm not going to worry about using portrait mode. I'm not going to worry about trying different angles. I'm not going to worry about the background or anything else. I'm just going to edit and we'll put a different background in it when we edit. That gives cheap to me. And honestly, it gives lazy too. Now, if you're going to get mad because I said lazy and you're like, well, I don't have time in the salon to take photos or pay attention to details or whatever, content days. I talked about this in episode 62, the Burnout and Breakdowns episode, content days. I spent a lot of time last year walking on eggshells for people to try not to hurt their feelings and make sure that what I was saying applied to everyone. But if you are lazy at content but complain about it, then that's a you problem, and I'm not walking on those eggshells anymore. People who use apps to change the background, like maybe you have a really good picture of some hair that you like, right? And the background just wasn't giving, so you change it to like a sky or something. Sure, it's artsy and it's fun and it's cool, and maybe you were doing your best to salvage that image. But if you would put forth the extra effort in the first place, you wouldn't have had to do that, and you wouldn't have ended up looking like a sixth grader made it on Photo Leap. A lot of times when people use these apps to change the background, the lighting that's on the hair never matches the background. It's really hard to get those two to match up. It's really hard to find a background that has the same exact lighting as the lighting that was on the hair in the photo that you took. And that might hurt some people's feelings, but you don't come here to get lied to, and you do come here for the truth, and that is the fucking truth, or that's my truth. And that's another reason why I feel the way that I feel about editing is because I feel like when you remove your client's pores or change their face completely and you make their skin look so smooth they look like a plastic doll, it looks cheap. It looks fake and it looks cheap. And as fashion color artists, we have to try a lot harder to make our services and brands come off as luxury. And you know what? You might not want to have a high perceived value. You might have a full book and you're happy and you're like, I don't have time to worry about photos and videos. Okay, cool. Content's not for you, and that's okay. I totally get it. But there are people out there that don't understand why people don't find value in their work. They wonder why they can't get more clients and, why their content doesn't get any views. And then when someone offers them advice or a solution like, hey, maybe you should think about polishing up your styling, or maybe you should try using portrait mode, or, your website could use a little bit of updating. Those same people, the ones who don't understand why their perceived value is low, are like, no, I don't want to do that. That's too much work. Every time I ever taught an in-person class, there was always one person that when presented with solutions was like, yeah, but, or yeah, I don't want to do that, or I've tried that. This is called being in your own way. If they were applying themselves in the manner that they said that they were, they would have seen some results. And that's the thing about education. If you don't use it, if you don't use the knowledge that's given to you, then you're not going to see results. You can't just take a course and think that's doing the work. That's not doing the work. That's not where it ends. You have to take the course, gain the knowledge, then apply it. That's where it starts. And then hopefully you see results and you build and you get better from there. I understand that it can be a lot dealing with clients working 8 to 12 hours a day, then come home, you have to deal with family stuff, feed yourself, and all the other things that come with, being an adult. Then on top of that, you have to worry about content. I totally get it. But if you want something, you have to find a way to get it. Hair, social media, creating content, it consumed me for about 5 years, and the time and effort I put in more than paid off. Now I'm on a different course, still using social media, and it's continuing to pay off. I always try to be very sympathetic or open-minded with people who are like, yeah, I don't want to do that though. It reminds me of episode 56, the one where I talked about the girl who asked me how to get big brands to notice her work. And when I was honest with her about like her photography and her styling, she got all mad. That's exactly the I don't want to do that people. That's how they are. So if you're listening to this and you're offended, dig deep and ask yourself why. Unpack that shit. And once you do, you might realize that you're not willing to put in the work. You're not willing to put in the effort. So for you, you might not have what it takes to be successful online. And it might be time for some new goals. But if you are willing to do the work, get out there and find some resources that can help you get to where you want to go. If you have the monetary means to hire somebody, do that. And I also want to circle back to like being successful online might not be for you. That's okay. Just because Meg in the Sweet Over is doing it doesn't mean that you have to do it. Just because Brenda down the street at her little podunk salon is doing it and finding success with it doesn't mean that you have to do it. People like Lita exist on the internet and people believe her. If she can do it, anybody can do it. All you have to do is apply yourself. So the real question is, does Vivid Hair come off as cheap because the artist behind the business won't put the effort into their whole business? Or maybe a better question would be, what would make Vivid Hair color perceived as high value? We have tried telling clients how much our products cost, how much our suites cost, how much time it takes to do one of these looks. We have let them know how much our education costs, how much our shears cost, how much hair shows and continued education costs. We have done all of that, and none of it has worked. If anything, people hate us more than ever now. But did you ever ask yourself why it didn't work? Aside from the obvious fact that most people are selfish, here's why. If you have to tell someone your value, they're not worth telling in the first place because they're never going to see it. Value in this industry is something that is seen and not told. It's something that is experienced and not told. When it comes to hair, you cannot talk your way into perceived value. You have to prove yourself. You have to earn it. And a lot of times you do that by creating a luxurious, I'm using air quotes, brand. You do it through your content and you do it through your work, which is your content these days. And I also feel like too, and this is just a side note that's like not scripted, I feel like perceived value like in the 80s or early 90s, before we had this like influx of social media, perceived value was, what did your salon look like? When I walked into your salon, how was I treated? What was the customer experience? What were my friends down the block saying about your salon? What did the book club say about your salon? Becky that goes to church with Maggie, what did she say about that stylist at that salon? Word of mouth was perceived value back then. It still works today. Those customer experiences and, you know, the things that people say about your salon and the vibe that your salon gives, all of that still applies. Now there's just extra, which is social media and the visuals of it. The other issue I have with a high perceived value, and this, you know, may or may not be a good thing, is that people are automatically going to assume that you are booked and busy. When I first started on social media, I was trying to book in clients. I had just opened my suite. I was posting every single day. And a lot of the content that I was posting was recycled. It was the same person over and over again, just different color hair. I took so many models and I ended up having a lot of house models that I, you know, did their hair a lot over and over again. So those pictures that these people were seeing, it was like the same 3 girls. And there were times where I would talk to somebody or like randomly would see them and they'd be like, oh yeah, I wanted to book with you, but you're always posting. So I just assumed that you were busy. I always wondered to myself, is this an excuse or is it true? But I heard it so many times that I was like, there's no way that all these people are coming up with the same excuse. But like, I literally had to tell them, no, I am not too busy. Please book. Like, let's book you an appointment right now. I am absolutely taking clients. Get your phone out. Let's book it. But that story is a perfect example of something that's been perceived by someone, even though no one has told them that that is the case. They just assumed it. Which this can also go in a very negative way with perceived value, because there are a lot of stylists out there who are not good at doing hair, who will bleach your hair even though you tell them not to. Then they'll make a video about it, post it on TikTok, get roasted in the comments, and not give a fuck. There's also a lot of stylists who leave bleed marks and they try to do balayage and it's spotty and terrible, but they cover it up with curls. So while perceived value, like you want to work on that and you want to whatever, it can also go in the negative way because somebody can have that perceived value and be very good at branding and then be really terrible at hair. So I challenge you to think about what would make fashion color artists perceived as higher value. I'm going to give you my list of things that I'm changing or that I've already changed, things that I see other people doing that is elevating their perceived value. And I know I talked a lot about content here, but I feel like that's where it starts because that's where people start to search for you. So my number 1 is obviously presentation of work. This is so important, okay? This is everything from styling down to video and everything in between. So if you take a vivid head of hair that was shot on a nice camera with a nice lens and has a very polished style, and you put that next to someone who just randomly took a photo with an iPhone, which one has a higher perceived value? Which one do you go and look at and say, this one looks more luxury or this one looks more expensive? Now, take the same polished style, shoot it on an iPhone, and put it next to the one of those like messy, bubble braided, like grunge looks. Now, which one has a higher perceived value? I don't think that people realize how drawn to quality images and video they are. And everyone can say that curated imagery is out and that people want to see real, authentic photos that are taken in the moment. Sure. I think that's more lifestyle shit though, like your everyday life, like what you're doing behind the scenes. Because when potential customers are looking at an artist's portfolio, aka your social media feed, I'm telling you 9 times out of 10, that higher quality image or video is going to take the cake. It looks more put together. It looks like someone took more time on their client. And this doesn't even begin to touch on what brands are looking for if you're trying to partner with any of them. Also, the other thing about clients is that a lot of the times they mirror themselves in your work. I've talked about this before in previous episodes, but clients will look at you and they'll look at your work and they'll try to picture it on themselves. Subconsciously, they're thinking, could I see myself wearing that? And they are picturing it on themselves. So while you may have colored this head of hair and it's beautiful and it's amazing and you want to like give it like a certain aesthetic, like the grunge bubble braids and whatever, 9 times out of 10, no client is going to want to wear that unless it's for a certain type of event. This is one of the reasons that I like back of head photos. I know a lot of people have said this year that back of head photos are out, but I like back of head photos for the reason that it's taking away the factor of I want to look like someone else. And it's only giving them the option to decide on the hair and not the face. This is also why styling is so important. Like the messy, frizzy, tight curls that are like all brushed out. Somebody might look at that and say, I do not want my hair to look like that. Or I don't want to come out of the salon looking that way. So going with a more classic style is a bit more beneficial because it relates to more people. That doesn't mean that you can't have fun and do some crazy photo shoots and whatever. There's nothing wrong with having a variety of looks in your portfolio, but the everyday client doesn't wear those looks. And who are brands selling to? Brands are selling to the everyday client. So if that's also another route you're trying to take, you need relatable, everyday client type photos. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, fuck off, I'm going to do what I want, that's fine. But if you're going to be making these like wild styles on top of wild hair color, maybe take some editorial classes on how to style the hair so that it looks good on camera. And it might not be a bad idea to invest in a photography class either, even if it is just for your phone. There are plenty of photos that come off of iPhones looking fucking amazing. But just putting in that little bit of effort and educate yourself on how to do those editorial looks the right way and then turn around and photograph them the right way, that is going to elevate your perceived value and allow you to still do what you want to do. So 2, your website. For those of you who don't know, I have learned how to use 3 different website platforms in the last 2 years. And if I can do it, you guys can do it. So if you have an amazing portfolio on Instagram and somebody clicks on your website and it looks like the free version of Wix from 2007, you have a problem. There are plenty of people out there that you can hire to make a website. And I know it's very daunting for a lot of people. I myself, like I said, learned to use all those different platforms and I'm one to pull my hair out every single fucking time. So I don't blame you for, if that's something that you don't want to do or you don't want to mess with, but it is a priority and you should make it one. There's a laundry list of resources for website building and brand design in the hair industry by people who have been in the industry. Having a clear and concise message is important. Also, having a site that's easy to navigate is important. People need to be able to easily find what they're looking for or they're going to click out. You're going to lose a client or you're going to lose a student, depending on what you're selling. And I'm not going to tell you that my website is perfect. I built it myself. And honestly, it's a little confusing in some ways, but I am working on fixing that this year. My point is, social media is not the be all end all for your clients. I know I talk a lot about selling to your target audience, but once you get them in the funnel, because like I said earlier, social media is just the top of funnel and you have them obsessed with you and you have them obsessed with your work and your knowledge, you have to give them that obvious next step, which is going to be to want to book with you. But they have to have a place to go and do that. They also need a place to see if they can afford to book with you. Now, some of y'all just have a booking site and don't even fuck with, a regular website. And that's totally fine. But can we make that look decent? Can we brand that up a little bit? 3 is about how you show up. So this one might be an unpopular opinion or a hot take. And we all know, as I sit here in my red sweatpants, that I am a sweatpants girly, okay? We know I love to be comfortable and I don't love men telling hairdressers how to fucking dress and yada yada. So when I say show up, it's not what you think. But I am going to have to eat some of my words just a tiny bit on this one. I've noticed this like shift in this like way of thinking. So however you show up in your online content is how you should show up to work. Here's why. Your social media presence is, like I said, top of funnel. It's where your clients and brands enter into who you are, what you're about, your voice, your message, and just the whole 9. If you dress to impress on content days and you wear makeup on content days, but dress like The Walking Dead at work, when a client shows up, they're going to be stunned. And this has literally happened to me. I know it shouldn't matter what you look like because the outcome is the most important part. Your work is the most important part. And believe me, I get it. And to clarify, this is not about what you're wearing to work. But this has happened to me before. Someone found me online where I looked super cute and I looked super put together. And then when they came into the salon, I could literally see the shock on their face as their eyes like looked me up and down. I was wearing a shirt with bleach stains, leggings, Nikes. I had my apron on. I think I was wearing a beanie that day, and I was just wearing mascara and probably some eyebrows. And to be honest, that's more effort than I put in now. However, all of my social media content at the time, I had on lipstick, false lashes, a fresh blowout, cute outfits. So I can see where the disconnect was. Listen, I literally showed up to a Matrix event, and the girl who was like setting us up with our hotel rooms, it's like a one-off story, but the girl who was setting us up with our hotel rooms, I met her at the door, like we were texting. So when my Uber dropped me off, I met her at the front door. We kind of walked around for like an hour or so together. She was telling us about the events for the weekend or whatever. So we were actually going to meet Fergie that night. So of course I go up to my room, I get ready, I do my hair, I do my makeup, I put on this really cute blue sparkly dress, and I go down, and she is standing at a table with the other girls that I know. So I walk up and I'm like, hey guys, and everybody's like, oh hey. And she was like, hi. And she reached out her hand and she shook my hand, and I said, I'm Crystal, we met earlier. And she goes, holy shit, you look like a different person. That's the power of makeup. So that's also why I say you should look, if you want to do a little something extra for your content, like that's fine. Like I don't think lipstick is going to make or break you, but however you look in your content online is how you should look when you go to work, I guess, so you don't shock your clients. The point is, after all of that, the point is to show up how you would normally show up. Some days you may wear makeup, some days you may not. Some days you wear sweats and a beanie, some days you wear a dress. Just don't make yourself 100% curated all of the time just for your online presence if you don't look that way at work all the time. Believe it or not, people find the most value in relatability. Perceived value and relatability, they go hand in hand because everyone's idea of value, air quotes, is different. At the end of the day, you know your worth. You know how much it costs to run your business, how much you spend on supplies, yelling at people on the internet what your value is and yelling at them that you're worth what you charge because you pay A, B, C, and D. They do not give a fuck. Their rent is outrageous too, just like the rest of ours. They're paying $7 for fucking cereal just like the rest of us, and they don't care because they want what they want and they want it to be affordable, period. I want groceries to be affordable, period. So in order for someone to be willing to save up for weeks and weeks to be able to afford a service, they have to perceive that value in you on their own. Basically, it has to be their idea. Yelling at them means nothing. Arguing in the comments isn't going to change their mind. Making passive aggressive content and skits, it's not going to do anything for your value. If anything, it's going to decrease the value and make you look desperate. Those hairdressers that are making fun of clients in videos, which I have done this, so I'm not saying it's like super taboo, but of course I have done everything. But the hairdressers that are constantly making skits about clients and interactions in their chair instead of having meaningful conversations, that decreases their value. It might up their value as a content creator and it might up their social currency, but that's not their job. Their job is to be a hairdresser. And that's not to say that you can't be both, but you can't pay rent with likes, comments, and shares. Cereal is $7, not 7 likes and shares. So unless you can make a full-time salary off of just making content, then you need to start creating content that ups your value, creates meaningful conversations, gives education, and just all of the things that are not going to decrease your value. So that is all I have for you guys on today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. I feel like this episode was probably very much like a roller coaster. I hate her. I love her. That's a good point. That's stupid. Like, I get it. When I was writing this, I felt like I was contradicting myself a lot. And I do feel like when it comes to perceived value in social media content, it is all just a big contradiction. So I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions on this. I would love to have a conversation about this. That does not mean come over to the Instagram page or the comment section of YouTube and start acting like a fucking idiot. Let's have a conversation. So I would love to hear from you guys. I'm going to throw a poll on the trailer for this and on Spotify. And as always, if you would like to share your thoughts on this, maybe there can be a second episode, please feel free to email me. The link will be in the show notes and in the description. And that is all I have for you guys on today's episode. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Okay, bye. Say bye, Jasper.